in some type of community metalworking shop and things like that, and they bring it out to the desert and they destroy it. And they come back to their communities and Burning Man's over. It was only for that weekend or however long it lasts. And I think that's really sad, because these communities are being drained of these resources and nobody is giving back to them. And I think that hope, I love hope, but I also want to talk about hobbyism within the scope of hope. It's really inspiring to come to Hope. This is my second time here, and to see everybody in such a trusting environment, everybody sharing with each other. There's tools and gadgets and things that people have made just left out. It's kind of understood that we all trust each other to deal with these things and not to steal them and not to break them, and to be accountable to each other. And I think that's really inspiring, and to see all these bright minds here with all these ideas. But wouldn't it be cool if hope could be every day? What if we all had a circle of hackers in our community? What if we all went into the community and taught other people about hacking? It's common for us to share information with each other, but it's not so common for us to go outside of our little circle of friends and talk to other people about hacking and talk to other people about computing and security. And I think that part of the hacker ethic should be giving back to the community. There should be a social responsibility from that. So I'll take an example. Part of the hacker ethic is that most of us believe that information should be free. And that's fairly vague, and I want to kind of ask the question, to whom should this information be free, right? Elliot was talking about in New Orleans and other disaster situations where people are really hungry for information, people who don't have the ability to access it. We all know that corporations, governments, and people with lots of money already access information really easily. They have enough resources to do that. But it's the people that don't have the resources to do that that really need the information. That's who the information should be going to, and that's what the kind of technologies we should be working on should do. And so I'll take an example of a doctor. If you're a doctor and you're in a restaurant and somebody's choking, it's expected that you're going to go give that person the Heimlich maneuver and that you're going to save their life or at least make a good effort at it. And if you don't, you're seen as some type of wretched human being, if even that. And if you're a lawyer, you're expected to do pro bono work and to give your legal services to the public good and to give free representation to people. But in the hacker community, we don't really have that. We have the idea that we should give back to our own community, but we don't have the idea that we should give back to communities outside of ourselves. Luckily, there's a few hackers who kind of see this, and there's some really cool projects that have arisen from this idea, one of them being FreeGeek, which is a project where hackers come together. Yeah, please give it up for FreeGeek. It's an amazing project. And this is a picture from someone at FreeGeek. Basically what the project does is they collect old or partially broken computers and electronics. They recycle them, and they give them to people who normally couldn't afford computers. And at the same time, they're educating people about computers and how they work. And anyone, even whether they're a hacker or not, is able to go in there and learn about computers and learn about what makes them so interesting and special, what leads us to be so fascinated with them at this conference. So community responsibility is ultimately based on trust. That's ultimately what communities are based on. What makes everyone in this room different from the people I see walking on the street? Why do I see you differently? And the reason is because I trust you and you trust me. I don't trust you like someone I've known for my entire life, but there's a certain level of trust in our community. More than the trust you'd have for the average person. And that's what makes a community, is the ability for people to be able to communicate freely amongst each other without feeling like there's going to be some type of reprisal for their actions. And trust comes from consent, right? When you leave out your tools at Hope, you know that no one's going to take it because it's understood through consent that nobody's going to take them and nobody's going to mess with your things, and that people, if you speak your mind freely here, that no one's going to hurt you for that. And that's based on consent. And sometimes consent is implicit and sometimes it's explicit. For example, doctors use what they call thorough consent, which means that if you're going to give a patient a medication, if you're going to give a patient a treatment, you have to tell the patient what the risks are, if it's going to complicate or interfere with other drugs they're taking. Or it's also called informed consent sometimes. And we also have consent in the realm of sexual activity, where it's very important to be explicit with consent. And I think lots of times we imply consent in situations where it shouldn't be implied. And I think that our values that we hold and our understanding that anonymity is integral part of free speech. Because if you can't speak anonymously, you can't speak freely, and you can't speak your mind because there might be someone who wanted to hurt you for that. And I think everyone at this conference values safety and privacy and anonymity. And for people in that community, that means not informing on your friends. So the question is, if there's people at this conference who have cooperated and sent some of us to jail, or hurt some of us, or participated in activities that have resulted in the destruction of part of the hacker community, I have to ask myself, is this conference what it's always been to me? This is hard. It's clear that federal agencies have drawn a line in the sand. The FBI, the Secret Service, the Department of Homeland Security, those in power see hackers as threats to their power. They see us as threats to society, threats to their management of information. When we do security research and we find a vulnerability in a commonly used protocol, we don't ask the people who designed the protocol, we don't ask the producer of the software if it's okay for us to ruin their reputation by showing that their software had flaws. It'd be nice if we told them beforehand before we released the information, but if they don't fix the flaw, it's our obligation to say something about that, to make that information free to those who are most affected by it. So that activity in and of itself is a threat to power. It's a threat to the people who want to manage information. So for us, the line in the sand has already been drawn. It's clear that there's them and there's us. We don't get to decide where this line is at this point. And so going with that, we have to understand that feds and cops, especially in the realm of hacking, are strangers to us. They're not hackers. They're not our friends. They're not here to learn about hacking or to engage in the thrill of exploration of technology. They're here to gather evidence to prosecute us. They're here to stop us from distributing information freely. They're here to stop us from doing exactly what we came here to do. And so for that reason, we should not talk to them. They have different intentions. I often ask people when talking about recent situations that have happened in our community, imagine if you had a job where you travel a lot, and your house was left alone, your pets were there alone. You wanted to make sure that your house was safe, that your pets were alive when you got back, and you have a friend who comes over once a month to check on your animals and check on your house to make sure that nothing has moved, nothing's been changed, the doors are locked. And that person can come to your house every day for a month, every day for a year and check on your house. But it only takes one time for that person to give the keys to someone else until you stop trusting them. In the hacker community, we need to have a similar approach to those who do that. And in conclusion, stronger communities with stronger participation from this community and other communities, when we get together, we're going to have a stronger hacker movement. And until that happens, division will constantly be a problem for us. Thank you.
We don't have much time for questions, so we'll try to take a couple quick questions, and then we'll be around afterwards if you want to talk to us about crisis and technology.
All right. Just had a question. I didn't know where you were going with the statement that ham radio is kind of outdated. I just want to say, you know, I think you guys are doing great. Sometimes you have a full-scale disaster, though, where the cell networks are out or they're jammed with people trying to make calls. Give me a car battery and a piece of wire. My little low-powered FM transmitter can reach someone in another city that can digitize a message and send it across the country to tell your family that you're safe. So I think it's always going to be an alternative.
It's a good alternative. I'm also a licensed ham operator. We also, I think everybody up here has built transmitters and worked on it. I think what we're saying is that for different circumstances, it's not easily accessible to everybody, like it once was, where everybody could turn into a radio. But yes, it's a great, and that's why we had Aries. We're big fans of Aries.
Sure. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thanks for doing what you do.
Hi. So I was in New Orleans doing tech work after Katrina with Common Ground for a while, and well, the sort of external structure of it did a lot of useful stuff and a lot of very important stuff happened. Inside, it was kind of a clusterfuck. And I think it's really hard, and it takes a lot of practice to be able to form cohesive communities in tough times, and I'm wondering how we can get good at that. By what means can we get good at having real life communities and like maintaining structures that work and don't just do external stuff but are also like healthy for people inside them?
Thanks for that question. Actually, one of the things that we didn't mention is that our little group, Aftershock After Alliance, Action Alliance, is a New York-based group, and some of what we learned in our participation in the relief work in Katrina is that it's really important to be supporting people in their community, in place, and not be an outsider. Even when you come with the best of intentions, it's always a problem when you're coming from the outside. So our goal is really to be training and communicating and talking to our neighbors in our communities now, before something bad happens or something that is perceived as a crisis, as opposed to when everything is in total disarray. So we totally agree that it's very difficult to do it with outsiders, and we are training other communities, and we're giving trainings to other people, and we are helping people form their own groups.
And I think the thing to remember too is that with Katrina was the really first time that this type of community, unlike the amateur radio community, which had been doing this forever, was the first time that this type of community came together for a natural disaster. And I think some of the things that March Hare and stuff are working on is to try to get more and more people using it, not just when there's a natural disaster, but at other times. So when there is a need, it can easily flow into that.
Practice.
I was just wondering if you were familiar with any channels or networks that you'd recommend using to make sure that supplies reach like disaster areas and also countries that are unshippable, like Myanmar, things like that.
I think one of the things that we're trying to work on is, we're more, this panel was more about information, but there is good information on supplies. You could go to our website, Aftershock Action.
I know Google.org just released a tool for resource management in crisis things. It's called Resource Finder, I think.
Can you repeat that on the mic so that we capture it in the video? Somebody?
Resourcefinder.com from Google. Is this what you're saying?
Yeah, it's a thing called Resource Finder, which just got released by Google.org, and it's supposed to be like, we've got an orthopedic surgeon here. We've got a patient who's got a screwed up foot over here, and linking them together. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
Well, one of our concerns is that we don't actually know what the attitude of Google is towards grassroots organizing, and they're obviously very open with the information that they're collecting on people and sharing it with law enforcement and other agencies that we may not want to share that information with.
Maybe time for one more question, guys. That's it.
Just before the last question goes, we have some literature up here. Hackblock produces a zine, and there's also some information from them about the collective and what they're doing in New York and how to get involved. So if you're interested in working on this kind of stuff, come look at what we have, come talk to us, and we also have a table downstairs near the express elevator.
Okay, in reference to the concerns about using Google services, you're using Twitter for a lot of this stuff. How do you feel about that? Do you feel you can trust that organization to not reveal?
No, thank you for asking. I actually didn't speak to that. We can't trust Twitter, in fact, and we had two mechanisms for dealing with that. One was asking folks who were using and participating to buy anonymous phones with cash, and recently we had an experience where Twitter started shutting off our feeds, and so now we're planning on using other backends, whether that's directly wiring in cell phones or using a service like I can't remember, but there's services similar with an API to SMS gateway that we're looking to. Not Identica, not GeoCat. NeoChat? Maybe NeoChat. I'm not familiar with that. I can't remember.
Also, are you aware that in Europe people are now working on software for rogue GSM nodes to actually be able to create your own infrastructure using open source hardware and software?
That's great news. Can we talk afterwards
Yes.
about this?
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Next Hope, for having us.